All right, guys, we are back again. COVID Cabal. COVID Cabal, back again. Back again. What is up? What is up, people? What is up, people? What is going on? What's going on with the COVID Cabal family? If you are here, as always, drop a comment in the chat. If you are here, drop a comment in the chat. I want to see who's here. I want to see who showed up. We got some exciting stuff coming down the line with the COVID Cabal. And not just the COVID Cabal, with this show in general. So I'm gonna get into that. But if you guys are here, first of all, drop a comment in the chat. Today's gonna be a good episode. I think this is gonna be one of those ones where this is like classic COVID Cabal, where we're back again, trying to really parse things, break things down. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun episode. I want to give you guys some updates also before we get into the meat here. 2 in 1 week. That's right, J-Dog. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. If you guys are here, drop a comment in the chat right now. If I don't see a comment in the chat right now, I'm shutting down COVID Cabal. I'm not doing it anymore. I need a comment in the chat right now. I want these comments. Give me the comments. Feed me the luge comments. That's right. That's right. All right, we can do the show because we're getting some comments now. Guys, I am going to so at risk of sounding like, what's up, Romeo? What's going on, man? At risk of sounding like Ben Shapiro here, I do want to say something. And I've been thinking about this. You know, it hit me that the night Charlie was assassinated, and I've been really musing on it the last, couple days. And those of you guys who were watching my Dynamic Man podcast yesterday saw me. If you stayed till the end, you may have seen me talk a little bit about this too. But I think it's time to start gearing this up more. Those of you guys who watched season 1, yeah, I cannot talk quite as fast as Shapiro, or maybe I can talk really fast like Shapiro. I can't do a nasally voice though. I don't like the nasally voice. No, I mean, in all seriousness, those of you guys who were here for season 1 COVID Cabal, you, hold on 1 second. One second, guys. Okay. So, those of you guys who were here for first season of COVID Cabal know that COVID Cabal was from COVID. We started in March 2020, and we were pretty consistent 1 to 2 times a week all the way up until we got to the election thefts. And then things really kicked off, and then COVID Cabal was this, 5 or 6 times a week. I think one night I did 2 in one night. I don't know that we're going to get back to that level. I do not know at this point in time whether I want to be a streamer, a professional streamer. One of the things about being a professional streamer, first off, you got to have like a streaming studio, and maybe I'll have that someday in the future. But these guys spend all their day streaming and talking, and I don't know. It's no offense to people. I think people have different skills, and some people really enjoy that, but to me, it's too much. I can't imagine just being on all day doing that stuff, just talking. I feel like that would be very destructive towards the rest of my life. I have no interest in doing it. However, regular show is a different story. Can I do a show every day, at least every weekday? I think that's a possibility. I think I can do a show every weekday, right? So anyway, what I want to the point I'm trying to make here is that I think the assassination of Charlie Kirk lets us know that we are heading into a new phase in the same sort of way that we were heading into a new phase when the election was stolen. Maybe we are not quite at that level of intensity, but I think everybody knows that this stuff is it's heating up. This was a significant event and a significant turning point, and I think the next 6 months are going to be substantially more momentous than the last 6. Put it that way. as we enter into perhaps the denouement of this chapter of America's story in the fight against the cabal. Not that I think that things just are going to be perfect afterwards, but I do think that we are coming to the denouement when it comes to the arrests and the real breakout revelation of everything that's happened in the public consciousness, the end of wokeism as a cultural force. Let's put it that way. So, with that being said, I do not want to. I don't want to act like a Ben Shapiro. You know what I mean? And say that I'm going to pick up the mic where Charlie Kirk dropped it, in that I am, I'm the future now. Don't worry, guys. I'm here. Just because you lost Charlie doesn't mean you don't have me, right? Um, I do think that there actually is something to be said for people who can talk about these topics, people who can do, analysis and help guide the zeitgeist. We are in a vacuum with the loss of Charlie Kirk, and people are going to fill that vacuum. Ben Shapiro is probably the least relevant person who's going to try to fill the vacuum, because nobody really gives a shit about what Ben Shapiro has to say. That's what's so funny. And I'm going to talk about some of this stuff in a bigger picture thing. But all of this stuff, like, Ben, you saw these rumors going around. Ben Shapiro is going to take over Turning Point USA. The Jews are doing everything. Look, guys, and we're going to get into this more on COVID Cabal today, but like, this stuff can get a little, this stuff can get a little, like, people are losing their minds. They're losing their minds on the Jew stuff. And I'm not saying that as a Jew shill. I think the Israeli government committed 9/11. Okay. I am not some Jew shill, but I have noticed this shift from, it's like, you can't ever talk about the Jews about anything, to now some people are only talking about them as if there is no other factions in the world than the Israelis, as if there is no other people who have any incentives, as if there is, I have to say, like, there's actually a certain kind of, like, it's almost a little too flattering. Like, a lot of people have power over you when their power is hidden. When the power becomes overt, when it's obvious that a group controls you, they start to lose power a lot. And don't get me wrong, Israeli lobby is still very, very serious, and it certainly controls Congress. And I'm not trying to downplay this stuff. I'm really not trying to downplay this stuff. But what I am trying to say is that don't give the devil his due, so to speak, but don't give the devil more than that. Like, nobody in their right mind should think that Ben Shapiro has any chance of controlling Turning Point USA, and that anybody is going to, like, super listen to Ben Shapiro. He's been losing support for a long time, right? That group is losing its control over American politics. So, with that said, let's get into, well, let me just finish my thought. But the point is, right, as somebody in here says, as Bannon says at Next Man Up, so people need to fill the vacuum, because people are going to fill it. And, I don't think I am perfect by any means, but I think I have good things to say. I think I have good analysis. You guys obviously come to COVID Cabal because it is a place where we actually do some serious thinking. We have fun, but it's actually, serious parsing of events. And, maybe one of these days, hey, we already have slides. That's a big improvement, right? So at some point, COVID Cabal will get better and better in its production capacity, and then maybe we can actually do things. But I'll say this. I found Charlie in the last recent years, when I got out of prison and seeing what he was saying, I saw Charlie as a really serious voice of reason. And I was surprised how at this point in our lives, I felt like I agreed with him on virtually everything he was saying. The way that the balance and proportionality he had for a lot of the takes geopolitically was really, it showed a serious person and a discerning person, right? He was trying to cut towards what actually was going on rather than pick some polarizing position like, you know, rah rah, like Iran's amazing and Israel's the bad guys, or blah blah, you know, support the Jews or you're terrible anti-Semite. He really seemed to cut through the quick. So maybe I'll be able to do some things to help with that. Anyway, I am an ant compared to him. So, but you know, if I can take up just a little bit more space in here, and you have to do more content to do that. So even though I have no time, I'm waking up at like 2:30 in the morning to do writing and stuff like that. But we'll get it done, guys. We'll get it done. CABAL is here, and it's here to stay. No more feds arresting me. So let's talk a little bit about this. So I think the main scandal. Well, first off, let's say what we know. We know now that 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, Antifa supporter, has been arrested, and he was arrested because his father turned him into the feds, basically. And people are freaking out about this, and they're right to freak out about it in some sense, that they only caught the guy because the guy's father turned him in, which means that what was the FBI field office doing? There's two things. There's two sides to this, I'm going to say. The first side is that I don't think the American public understands that the feds are fucking stupid. Okay? They are people. You think that because they have this huge like intelligence infrastructure that they cannot do all these things. And maybe in theory they can. But the bottom line is everybody in the feds who goes in, I tweeted this today, but I'm telling you, I live this. I spoke to hundreds of inmates. All you fucking do in the prison, all people do, and eventually you want to blow your brains out over it, right? But all people do is tell their little sob stories about how, you know, they tell their sob story basically about how the feds did this and then the feds did that. This person ratted, this person ratted. Every single person, the reason that they got convicted is because people ratted. That's it. That's why in the feds, people hated rats, because everybody in the feds was rat on. I was rat on by a family member. Now, I would have been picked up because I was public on social media, but I was picked up as fast as I was. It would have probably taken the feds months to find me. The only reason they got to me is because I had college classmates, high school classmates. I had family members tell the feds, hey, this guy was in the Capitol. It would have taken the feds months to find my social media, to find that I was on social media if nobody said anything to them. Now, that said, obviously I was not high profile. If in my case, it would have been easy for the feds if they were actually dedicated their force to trying to find who was this guy who smoked a cigarette. We hear rumors a guy smoked a cigarette outside of the Capitol and was ranting. You know what I mean? They would find me. But the point is that they are not really that great at solving crimes. They're not really that great of an investigative agency. They're not. They are slow. They are bumbling. They're a bureaucracy. So most of it is just bureaucratic inertia. And they're people who are behind their desks, and they only find out what to do. It's not that their surveillance is like, you know, they are really just not that great at solving crimes. It's the tip-offs that get them people. So this is one part of the story that I don't think that your average person who's trying to figure out what happened, why did it take the feds so long to find him, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that they get it, that they get that at all. And they should get it because it's the reality. So that's the first part of this I want to say. However, that does not mean I don't think that there are problems with the field office in Utah. And I will say this, I don't know why, I'm hearing that Cash changed the person who was running the Utah field office like 2 weeks ago or something like that. If I didn't have such like of a, I don't know if this is incidental. It's something I have to look more into, right? I have to look more into it. I'll tell you this, that Under normal circumstances, I would find that kind of suspicious. I don't get any sense whatsoever that Cash is some sort of saboteur. I do not see it in his intent. I see real love and real intent there. And that's the reason that Trump has him in this position. As I said earlier today on X, this is, I'm not saying that Cash is doing the best job at the FBI, Cash and Dan. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to claim that this is like everything's going amazingly and that they're just running the agency in a fantastic manner. And some of that may be competence and ability to run an organization of this size. So I'm not denying that. However, Trump has him in those positions. And actually, the reason he brought in Dan, I want to really emphasize this because there's already a deputy, director of FBI. Dan was brought in as like an auxiliary one. I'm telling you, the reason that Dan is in that position is because Cash doesn't have anybody he can trust. And Cash probably told Trump, I need at least one guy who I know is totally with us that can help me with this because I am totally alienated in here. I'm totally isolated. And I bet you that there are so many games. This is an institution that's been rotten since the very, very beginning. And over the past, since the Bush years in particular, I mean, it's gotten really bad, right? It's gotten really, really bad. And the last 4 years over Biden, it's been completely staffed with people who are, supportive of Antifa. So even if you do have a lot of decent FBI agents, I'm just going to call them drones, to be honest, because I'm sorry, but a lot of you guys did a lot of fucked up stuff. And I'm not as vindictive as some J6ers, but a lot of you guys did a lot of fucked up stuff to the country. But I don't think that doesn't mean that I look at those FBI agents as, people who are carrying water for the Democratic Party as like as a matter of belief, nor do I think that most of those individuals, preferred to be doing that stuff. I imagine many of them are happy to actually get back to real threats. I genuinely believe that. I think that's probably the majority of the agents would prefer to just deal with real threats, real regular crimes and stuff like that. So at the same time, you are definitely having a lot of compartmentalized information in compartmentalized cells. And this is how it works in intelligence agencies. There is compartmentalization within them. Even the CIA, right? You say, oh, the CIA did this, the CIA did that. The CIA is totally compartmentalized. You have different field groups, and they have completely different, like, Andrew Tate's dad was CIA. Tucker Carlson's dad was CIA. So does that mean that Andrew Tate is CIA? Does that mean that Tucker Carlson's CIA? It's possible that they still have connections to these. I mean, but the bottom line is like, do you see that those, let's say they are, let's just entertain this idea. Do you see them as doing things that are supporting, the collapse of America? There are good portions, there are good compartmentalized sections of these intelligence agencies, and there are bad. And the issue is, how do you get into that stuff? The game of intelligence, it's a dirty game. It's a lot of deception. So I don't know the background behind why this, why this field office had their person removed by Cash, but he's been clean the FBI in general, and you may have seen that happen in a lot of different areas. I have heard that the Utah office is a very bad office. Okay, I've heard that. I've heard it's a very bad office. That doesn't surprise me because the Mormon Church is heavily connected to the intelligence agencies. So I'm sure that there's some sort of overlap there going on. So this is what I think is happening. And I said this earlier today before I even saw this tweet, right? According to the New York Times, FBI Director Cash was incensed that agents in Salt Lake City waited nearly 12 hours to show him a photo of the suspected killer of Charlie Kirk. Now, if you guys remember, yesterday I put on X how I just think I just said it as a comment to somebody, but like I didn't make it as a main post, but it's still up there, that the reason, like, early on Cash said, oh, we have this person, and then they didn't have somebody in person. Everyone's like, Cash, you're a fucking retard. I mean, can people be, I get it. Maybe he shouldn't have done it, but is it possible that people in his organization are lying to him? Like, look, notwithstanding everything I said about the FBI not being able to solve crimes on their own without tips, this is a very, 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 very high profile thing. And I'm not disputing that there's a level of embarrassment here, right? I I really get the sense that there was internal sabotage from Cash getting the information that he was talking about. That doesn't mean you get rid of Cash. You gonna put who the fuck are you gonna put in there instead? It's much better to have someone who we know is loyal, trying to get the agency under control, trying to root out the rogue elements. People, I really think people have no idea how bad it is, and they sit in these fucking like studio chairs. They're like, Cash is dumb. Cash, this is one of the, and I'm going to underline the arrogance of this kind of stuff, because look at Dan Bongino, right? Bongino. He did that same thing. He had his own studio, and he was talking about this stuff for years about how they got to do this, they got to do that. And now you see he's in there and he's not very happy, right? It's a lot harder than people realize. And I get it. It takes some degree of faith. All I can tell you guys is this. You have to know, this is about trust first and foremost. If you can trust that Cash is with us, which you have every reason to think, because he sacrificed a lot. He was one of the most outspoken people during the Biden years. He helped protect Trump with Russiagate. Cash is a really good guy. And I hate if maybe this is going to come across as cringe to some right-wing people, but it's also kind of bothering me at this point that everybody's like making fun of the fact that he's Indian. Like, I'm sorry, but I am like about denaturalizing migrants, okay? I am not some lukewarm person. I'm not talking about just the illegals. I think we need massive repatriation and denaturalization, not just in Europe, but in America, okay? So don't get it twisted. But Cash is an assimilated American, and he's a real patriot. And so is Harmeet Dillon. Harmeet Dillon, like, this stuff is kind of clownish to me. Harmeet Dillon, running the Civil Rights Division at the DOJ, has done more to protect white people than any other white attorney general in the last 60, 70 years. Kash Patel in the FBI is the least corrupt FBI director probably ever in the history of the agency. He's probably the only one who wasn't corrupt. And every one of those other guys were white guys. Okay? So look, I am, I have my own level of, ethno-narcissism. Okay? I have my identitarianism, but I can call a spade a spade. We have some really good people who are working in the administration. Trump didn't just do diversity hires with Kash Patel or Harmeet Dillon. These are people who are actually patriots, and they are actually helping the movement. And there's a certain point where you guys got to cool it with just like being nasty. There's no point in this stuff. It's really like at a certain point, I actually think it's like, it's kind of gross. It's kind of gross. I would never do that to somebody who was locking shields with me. Vivek's a grifter. Okay? Vivek is a grifter. And if you can read body language and if you can read intent, you can see that he just wormed his way into this movement because he's got a new grift. But he's no different than any other like fucking Midwestern GOP, governor guy running for governor. I mean, that's the thing. Like, yeah, he's definitely much more Indian in mindset. And I say that in the negative connotation of like, striver kind of, not understanding, let's say, American culture and ethos, thinking that there's some issues with Americans, that Americans need to become more like him. I agree with all that stuff with Vivek. I really don't like Vivek, and I never liked him. And I could see he was slimy from the beginning. That's not who Cash is. These are people who put real integrity on the line. They're not. So anyway, enough of this stuff. I don't want to get bogged down in it. But the point is the FBI is super corrupt, and there's definitely a problem. There is definitely a problem with and I don't think it's nearly sufficient to just say, okay, we found Charlie Kirk's killer and that's it. We need to deal with these Discord servers. We need to figure out what exactly is going on there. We need to get to the roots. We designate Antifa a terror organization, and Trump needs to start, they need to start putting this stuff together. And if the FBI is trying to block that from happening, we have to ask who was talking to Tyler, right? Because, okay, I'm sure he went to college and he had shitlib professors. He was surrounded by shitlib ideology, and it started to twist him. Okay, I believe that we need to really deal with colleges right now. It's gone too far. However, the colleges are not what ultimately had him go to the point where he was going to get a gun and shoot people. This is happening on the Discord servers, and there are feds talking to him. Absolutely, there are feds talking to him. Feds providing the weapon. And I want to point out this too. And this is where we get to stop attacking the left. Most of us are caring individuals. Yeah, all right. I haven't really seen a lot of evidence of that. So we have right here resurfaced video of Patsy George Zinn, who was arrested while creating a diversion around Charlie Kirk's assassination, recounts how he knew Al-Qaeda was responsible for 9/11 attack the moment he saw the towers fall. Now, that is very, very interesting. And I want to point something out. Let's say this person, the fact that this person was there is, especially in Utah, right, is very bizarre. Super bizarre. Okay? And the fact that he would immediately say, arrest me, arrest me. This doesn't mean that this guy, Tyler, knew that person was going to do that. They probably never knew each other or interacted with each other. Yeah, and that's a good question here. Fox is saying, is that the same dude he has an age day in 25 years? I think he looks a little bit older. I'm going to accept this as being true. Maybe it actually isn't true, but I'm assuming that these people did their due diligence with this because it's been up for a while now. Okay. If it's not true, we'll talk about that next COVID cabal. That makes things a lot cleaner. But look, this guy, okay, this guy, how do I put this? He's there to create a diversion. He's there to create a diversion. There's no other explanation for it, because no one is going to have the reaction to say to the police, arrest me, arrest me. I shot him, arrest me. No one's going to have the mind to do something like that unless they've been primed to do it. They knew it was coming, right? There's also the nature of the questions. It's kind of bizarre that the questions at the time were about mass shootings when he was shot. So look, what does that mean? Well, this guy, okay, he's Jewish. He's saying he knew Al-Qaeda was responsible for 9/11 attack the moment he saw the towers fall. That's the same thing that Ehud Olmert, I think, it's been a while since I studied this stuff. Mayor of Jerusalem at the time, I believe it was the mayor of Jerusalem, said immediately that Al-Qaeda did it like right after the towers were attacked. We're not going to go through the whole 9/11 stuff. I'll just tell you from my research into it, it seems to have been done by the Israeli government. Mossad did it. And it was supported, or at least not opposed, by the neocon elements in the Bush administration. Okay, so I say that now. This guy is obviously, he seems to have played a role with that with 9/11. He's suspicious, saying a narrative for 9/11 that it was Al-Qaeda, and now suspiciously he is at this event and he is trying to block the police essentially from being able to get a run on the actual shooter. So that tells me that he was activated to do that, and maybe Tyler Robinson never knew him or anything like that, but there's some organization going on here. People telling these individuals to do it, even if they don't know each other. They're being independently told to do things. Remember, also, we saw posts that were indicating that Charlie Kirk was going to get killed at this event from anonymous accounts. So that's more evidence that there was some foreknowledge from various individuals. Here's where we get into like the question though. So you have all these people who are really, really, they're obsessed with Jews right now. And they're saying that Israel did this. Here's my problem with that. And I'm gonna say the positives. The positives we have is what I just showed you, right? With this guy, George Zinn. Looks on the surface like he's got some Mossad ties. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the statements that we heard, and this was all posted back in August, that Charlie Kirk, he had denied Israeli funding and was starting to kind of move against that narrative. I still considered him to be fairly moderate on the topic, probably about where I am, maybe even more moderate than me, right? But he was, but yeah, he was being willing to speak out about things, like October 7th being a setup. I've heard from people in the IDF that it was a setup, because there's no way that you could have anything cross that territory and nobody knew it, right? It's the most heavily monitored piece of land in the entire world. So, that to me is not a super, that's like, you're not allowed to say that, but what's the pretext? What does it allow Israel to do, and specifically Netanyahu? I want to be clear about this. When I talk about the Israeli government, I'm not talking about individual Jews or individual Israelis, many of whom are really not happy about this. And to the extent that they are engaged in the fight, well, it's an existential fight in the area. I've said many times that obviously Israel is ethnic cleansing Gaza, and sorry, that's fucking the real world. Okay, it's the real world. They've been in an existential fight with each other, and you better believe that if the shoe were on the other foot, there is no question the Palestinians would happily genocide every Israeli. Okay, some people don't like to hear that. It's the reality. If the Palestinians had the power and the capabilities that Israel has, they would be far more ruthless to the Israelis than the Israelis are being to the Palestinians. The Jews in the Middle East, whatever you want to say about the state of Israel, they understand that. They understand in that region, you have to deal with force. You have to show power. Power rules everything. Okay. Anyway, it's a little digression here, because I don't want this to feel in one direction or another. This is the balanced perspective that I have on all this stuff. So Charlie Kirk was moving away. He was speaking out in American interests, and there is this article, and I haven't read it in full, and to be honest, I don't 100% trust everything in it. Not that I see anything, just because the gray zone, I don't know how reliable all this stuff is. But he says he was frightened by pro-Israeli forces before death. Late influencers turning point on Israel provoked private backlash. Let me see here if I have anything else I wanted to share details. I didn't carry the details here. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's basically like he was tired of Netanyahu trying to boss Trump around. From what I've seen in this article, there's things I don't really, it kind of seems like it's a psyop-y thing, because saying like Trump's afraid of Netanyahu. I have never seen Trump afraid of Netanyahu. That stuff is such cope. I've seen Netanyahu really frustrated by Trump, and them playing each other, and they might work together on certain things. They definitely don't trust each other, but this is going on, and I just think a lot of the Jew stuff goes all over the place. Is Mossad connected to the Butler shooting? This is what people were saying. they were saying that, but then they were also saying, but no, Trump made a deal with the Jews and that's why he's going to get elected. And as I was saying earlier, give the devil his due, but at a certain point, you kind of are cucking yourself when you say that, oh yeah, they have all the power and we can't do anything. They just control everything over and over and over again. I mean, people are breaking out of that power structure. They're losing their influence. So let's not assume that they can do everything they could do 10, 20 years ago. They don't have that same level of power. So this brings us to the question, was it Mossad? And I don't think we have a conclusive, we don't have a conclusion here. I don't think we have a conclusion here. But I will tell you this, I don't think it is Mossad. I know that the Jerusalem Post was one of the first articles, newspapers to talk about this, and Netanyahu talked about it early on. And again, so I'm not ruling it out, but I will just tell you this. This is what's important to me, and this is how I like to think about stuff, because I find it always points you in the right direction at the end of the day. How does Israel benefit at all from this? How do they benefit from it? I don't see any benefit to Israel killing Charlie Kirk. Because what happens when you get rid of Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk, for all of his movement towards, really soft and cordial and reasonable criticisms of Israel, stuff that myself or that Cernovich would have, he was not anti-Israel by any stretch of the imagination. And you kill Charlie Kirk, what do you get? Who's going to fill the vacuum? It's not Ben Shapiro, it's Nick Fuentes, right? And that's a whole other thing, because Nick Fuentes is, I don't know if he's being fully controlled by it. I'm not going to go that far, but there's no question he's had conversations with intelligence agents. What has Nick Fuentes advocated for? Fuentes was at January 6th, wasn't arrested, right? Only person. You're telling people to go in the Capitol, wasn't arrested. Him and Ray Epps have that. Ray Epps was only arrested like years later after everyone kept talking about Ray Epps. Fuentes wasn't. Fuentes ratted on people who were in January 6th. I know that for a fact. I'm not going to talk more about it, but I've talked to his friends of his. I know the kind of shit that he did. Fuentes was saying that Charlie Kirk was not a real Christian all throughout spring and summer. And so I know he gave a nice speech the other day, but, very, very, talking now about how amazing Charlie Kirk was and how Charlie died for Christ. This is what he said in May. He's not really a believing Christian, doesn't really believe in Christ, but he plays that up. He leans into that, plays into that inconvenient part, which is that he really doesn't have faith. He just tries to keep that part quiet. This is what Charlie Kirk lived by. Get married and have children. It's not only good and godly, it will bring you joy and legacy, but it's a simple act of defiance against the oligarchs and tyrants who would rather you die bitter, alone, and with nothing but robots by your side as you enter eternity. This is like, I didn't see this until recently, and I really wish I had supported Charlie. I think a lot of us feel this way. I wish I had supported Charlie Kirk more, because he really had the same values as me. I mean, this is exactly what I tell people. This, when I talk about being a dynamic man, this is exactly the vocation of my business. It's all about this. It's about living in a way that defies their despair and their malaise. Nick Fuentes is the complete fucking opposite of this. Nick Fuentes is never going to have sex, never going to have kids, right? Has no belief in the future. It's all resentment politics. That's why people, rightly say that it's spiritual leftism. You just, hate the Jews, but it's spiritual leftism. It's politics of resentment and victimhood. And, so now he's all like being condolences, and he's talking about, oh, it's all about Christ and Charlie Kirk. I think this is just grift, though. I don't think that, what's his face said this? Matt Walsh said it. I mean, people were trying to claim it was a Groyper who shot Charlie Kirk. That's not obviously the case. This guy's Antifa, DSA, right? But Democratic Socialists of America. So I'm not going to say that, Nick had this guy shot, although it's possible, I don't think it was out of the realm of possibility. I'm not saying Nick, sorry, let me be clear here, that some Groyper did this kind of stuff, because a Groyper tried to kill TPUSA person before, right? Tried to attack TPUSA. But point here is this. I think mostly Nick's stuff right now is a grift. He's just trying to take Charlie's audience. But if we step back here and we look at the big picture here, what do we have happening? You kill Charlie Kirk, what do you get? You don't get a more pro-Zionist message. You go from somebody who's not willing, who's pushing back on some things, but is still mostly, supportive of you, to getting somebody who blames you for literally everything and thinks you should stop existing. So what incentive would Mossad have to kill him? Oh, well, he betrayed them. He didn't take their money. I mean, so fucking what? There's a lot of people who aren't doing that. Like, this to me, this is not, it's not persuasive. I am not seeing persuasive reason. If you are looking at this, now here's the distinction. If you're looking at Israel being incentivized to do this stuff, if you're looking at Mossad as an agency that operates in Israel's best interest or in the Jews' best interest. Now, if you view Mossad and MI6 and the CIA as organizations that serve a bigger plan and a bigger group, and that group is actually willing at this point in time to throw Jews under the bus in order to achieve their chaos and strife around the world, then I think you have a more complicated argument. And of course, that's going to include Jews doing that to Jews, and that's what happened during World War II as well, right? Because even though the Nazis correctly identified that half the Bolsheviks over half of the Communist Party and the Soviet Union were Jews, that there was a lot of Jewish influence, and a lot of communism was sort of connected to Jewish groups, right? Even still, especially in Germany, there was a lot more people who were integrated there. And I'm not saying all. There was definitely parasitic elements, absolutely. But the point is that it's complicated. Don't think for a second that this group is not willing to sacrifice ordinary people or the state of Israel. I think that's where the big logical fallacy is coming, that every single thing is about Israel. Israel is a piece on the board, right? Like, just like the British Empire was a piece on the board. These people for a long time, these bankers, they were British, right? They were British, they were German, they were Jewish too, right? But the point is that this cabal were a lot of European elites. Well, what are those European elites doing to their own populations? Do they seem to care about them? What is it to think that there are not Jewish elites that feel the same way about Jewish people or the state of Israel? This is a distinction I want you guys to think about. So if you view this, that Israel, the Jews did this to help Israel, it's a nonsense take. It makes no sense at all. But if you're saying some element of Mossad that really works, like they have a higher objectives, and they were taking out Charlie Kirk because Charlie Kirk was somebody who was really effective at galvanizing the youth, building up a MAGA coalition, and not just a MAGA coalition, right? It wasn't just building the right, it was building a right that believes in this, that believes in getting married, having children, that believes in, the First Amendment, that believes in like American values and Christian values. Charlie Kirk was someone that they wanted to kill because he was a high resonance leader. He was somebody who was not just simply going to lead us on the right path, but the godly path, the higher path, rather than a path of resentment and destruction that just has a, right-wing veneer. Fuentes supported Kamala Harris. Okay, he tried to campaign for Kamala Harris. He is not the fucking future leader of the right. He's a piece of shit. Plain and simple. If Kamala Harris were president, I hope at this point people understand just how fucking bad it would be. So it's really rich to have somebody like him go and talk, like he's going to be the next leader. He should be the next leader. But as John's saying here, he is definitely going to lead a lot of young men down the path of destruction. And I don't know, maybe we're going to have to build up COVID cabal, talk more about it, to try to push back about it, because that's kind of the situation. So there's one last thing I'm just going to talk about here before I go. Cernovich here is talking about the Republican members of Congress, and I think this is a really important point to end on. Just in the same way that we've seen the FBI not really do much in, I think, stymie this investigation, especially from going in a direction that's really relevant for the country, because we don't care about just taking this guy. It's about getting rid of the network, right? Cernovich in this video has a really, really good point. And what is that point? The point is that the Republicans in Congress have enabled this. And they've enabled it so much. You have people like Massey, but not even just Massey. Massey's like a real particular scumbag, but not even just Massey. Like, in general, they are all saying the same stuff, which is, no, now is the time to, to come together. Like, we condemn both sides. What the fuck are you talking about, condemn both sides? We've been under attack from leftists for a decade. And it doesn't matter with the Scalise shooting. It doesn't matter about what they did to everybody, the Trump, trying to kill Trump. This is like at all the Proud Boys existed to protect people at rallies. Congressional Republicans want nothing to do with that. They don't want to protect anybody. They don't want to protect people on the right. So the point here is this. There's something really fishy here going on with these politicians. And I don't think I'm not convinced it's just lack of backbone. There is something stopping them from doing it. And, look, we're going to keep an open mind about this, but we all know that they have their handlers. We all know that they have their handlers from Israel. I'm just saying right now, I can't see why this would be to the benefit of Jews themselves or to Israel. I don't, unless the agenda, unless you're viewing it just simply from the standpoint that Israel itself doesn't matter, and this is just about trying to destroy us, different story. Then maybe we can start to see some connection here. But then they're just taking a different tact, and they're willing to throw, they're willing to they're trying to drum up a reaction. And so I'll just end with this. We need to be non-reactive. I don't mean that we don't prepare, we don't respond, but I can really see them using this to try to create some sort of civil war situation, because their plan has always been to break up the United States if they can't control it. And they'll want to have the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Maybe they'll try to have some retaliatory attack against leftists. They'll say that we're done by people on the right. Blue states start to freak out. Blue states need to secede. There needs to be some separation. You guys can read what I wrote here. Maybe I'll read it out at the end. I don't want to read it all out, guys. Should I read it all out? You guys can read it on my X page. But basically, I had a really long post that said about why they assassinated Charlie Kirk. It wasn't just because he was an effective leader. It was because they were accelerating the timeline for direct confrontation. They've been losing badly. This has been like a siege. Trump's been enacting a siege against them. And that's why Trump needs to go after the financial networks that have been propping up the Democratic Party. But I think it's going to be dangerous in the cities as we get towards the end of the year. I definitely think it's going to get dangerous in the cities. And I don't think we can put it past them to try to do secessionary actions. So are they going to succeed in this? No. No, they're not going to succeed. They are in a cursed position. It's a desperate position. So again, give the devil his due, but don't give the devil too much. But I think it's going to become more clear as time goes on what they were really trying to accomplish with this assassination, because there's no way that the kid acted on his own. He was put up to hit. He was groomed to do it, as they do it with all these fucking sick freaks. So anyway, guys, stay safe out there and enjoy your weekend. I will see you guys on the next COVID Cabal, maybe Monday. All right, take care.